Welcome to today's Explainer. We're going to unpack one of the most extreme, absolutely awe-inspiring life cycles in the entire natural world. We're talking about the agave americana. This is a desert succulent that operates on a timescale so completely disconnected from our own human sense of urgency, it literally forces you to stop and marvel at how nature actually works. Today, we're mapping out this organism's entire life cycle, breaking down those decades of silent waiting and the spectacular, fatal explosion of energy that marks its final days.
So just take a second to really think about this. Would you wait 20 years for a single moment of glory? In our human world, patience usually means waiting in line for a coffee, or maybe saving up for a few years to buy a house. But out in the wild, survival and reproduction can demand the ultimate sacrifice and a level of patience that spans literal decades. The plant we're looking at today gives up its entire life for one single, fleeting chance at reproduction.
Okay, let's dive into this. Part 1. The myth of the century. So while it's super dramatic to call it the century plant, it doesn't actually wait a full 100 years to produce its flower. But it can and will wait up to 30 years doing absolutely nothing visible to the naked eye. I mean, imagine that. For 3 decades, this plant just sits there in a harsh, baking desert environment. It endures blistering midday heat, freezing cold desert nights, and relentless drought. And on the surface, it seems totally static. But beneath those sharp leaves, it is quietly, relentlessly hoarding every single ounce of energy it can possibly gather from the sun and that dry desert soil.
To really get why it waits so incredibly long, we have to talk about monocarpic reproduction. This is the harsh biological reality of the agave's existence. Basically, it's a strategy where a plant flowers, sets its seeds exactly once, and then it dies. No second chances, no maybe next season. This is what's affectionately and kind of morbidly known as the death bloom. Every single drop of water, every ray of sunlight hoarded over those 30 years goes straight into this one fatal reproductive event.
Let's transition into the longest, most foundational phase of the plant's life. Section 2. Decades of desert patience. Picture the environment for a second. Dry, cracked desert soil. The agave starts out as a small, spiky rosette. Its thick, blue-gray leaves are armed with these really sharp, red-tipped spines right along the edges. And year after year, under the shifting shadows of that harsh, blinding midday sunlight, new spiky leaves just slowly emerge from the absolute center. It's almost imperceptible, but the entire rosette is gradually thickening and expanding outward across the sand.
If we look at the timeline here, you really see how this crucial waiting period unfolds. Years 1 through 10, it's just forming that tough, spiky exterior. Then years 10 to 20, the mature rosette is spreading these massive pointed leaves wide across the ground. And then year 20 and beyond, the final preparation. Seeing it laid out like this really underscores the sheer scale of time the plant spends doing nothing flashy. It's a total masterclass in preparation, literally building the massive battery it needs for its final act.
Section 3. The explosive stalk eruption. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the sudden biological trigger that flips after all those decades of agonizingly slow growth.
The waiting is suddenly over. What happens next is this violent burst of pent-up energy that fundamentally transforms the landscape. Look at this massive biological juxtaposition. You've got up to 30 years of silent, horizontal waiting pitted against just a few weeks of explosive, rapid, vertical growth. It's almost like the plant suddenly realizes its time is almost up and just hits fast forward on its own life cycle. All that stored energy is instantly channeled straight into the absolute center of the rosette.
And you have to look at the numbers to see just how insanely fast this happens. A thick, fresh green flower stalk erupts from the center and literally rockets upward. We're talking about growth of several inches in a single day. In practically no time at all, it surpasses 20 feet in total height, completely towering over that blue-gray rosette far below. It grows taller than a 2-story house. Honestly, you can almost imagine the creaking, woody sound of this massive structure just forcing its way into the clear blue sky. Here is the rapid-fire sequence once that stalk takes off. First, it erupts upward, totally covered in these small, leaf-like bracts spiraling up its length. Then, step 2. Near the very top, the stalk actually begins to split. It pushes out horizontal arms, creating this dramatic, massive candelabra shape against the sky. And finally, step 3. Along every single one of those newly formed branches, hundreds of small green flower buds begin to rapidly swell and form.
Which brings us to the climax and the beautiful, inevitable end. Section 4.
the magnificent death bloom. Just imagine the scene during that warm, glowing light of golden hour. Across every single branch of that massive candelabra, hundreds of dense clusters of bright yellow flowers suddenly burst open. It creates this absolutely stunning, glowing canopy of yellow hovering over 20 feet in the air. It's literally a beacon in the desert. And far down below, completely dwarfed by its own creation, sits the dark silhouette of the original dying rosette.
And this brilliantly illustrates the tragic beauty of the monocarpic life cycle. That glowing yellow beacon, it absolutely works. Bees and small desert birds arrive in droves, moving between the blooms to pollinate. The plant has finally achieved its ultimate goal. But in doing so, every last drop of that stored energy is fully, irreversibly depleted. As the flower shines so brightly up in the sky, the massive base rosette down on the desert floor completely dies. It has given literally everything it has to this single bloom.
So we end right back where we started, but hopefully with a much deeper understanding of what it actually takes to survive in nature. Is 20 years of patience worth one extraordinary bloom? For the agave americana, there really is no other way. It is just a stunning display of biological devotion. If this deep dive into nature's most extreme strategies amazed you, be sure to follow Science of Growth so you never miss what nature does next. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep exploring.